Yeah, yeah. For what is the flesh? Without the spirit, there's no best. Yeah, yeah. We live in the West, where the sins equal death. See, my earthly body doesn't mean nothing. I'll die for it if it means something. In this world, it's just long suffering. He sent his son because he loved me. I'm serious. People out here.
Hey, what's going on, family? I wanted to talk and get into where is the Holy Land. So this has been a hot topic in the Israelite community for a bit now, and I didn't really, I wasn't really actively looking into it until recently. I came across a really interesting video by a YouTube channel, revisionist.org, and I thought that he brought up some really good questions. And although, his videos are great, like definitely go check them out. But ultimately, it led me to a question: how do I know the Holy Land is where it is today? Like, am I able to prove that through Scripture? And the answer was no, I was not able to. So it led me down a very interesting research path. And so I wanted to talk about it and just see what, I just wanted to share my findings. And I'm not saying that, I have all the answers, but I'm definitely coming to the conclusion that what we're told, where they're telling us Jerusalem and the Holy Land is, it doesn't appear to be so. I'm going to take a look at some of these terms that come up, okay? A term like Nahar, all right? And when you check the Strong's Concordance, okay, it can mean a river, a flood, okay, a stream, okay, and that's reiterated down here too. So if we look at it according to the definition here, it says a stream including the sea, expectation, the Nile, okay, Euphrates, okay, so these are strong rivers that they mention. But it's interesting also that this term is apparently a general term, right? Like how is it that the term can be used for the Nile or the Euphrates? So context is required regarding this term, okay? Nahar it's not a term that's associated to a specific river, is my point, okay? But apparently it's a strong river. So something else I wanted to get into is this term, Red Sea. Man. So I'm just gonna, I'm at Blue Letter Bible so that we can get just really get into some of the actual definitions of these terms that we're seeing. So this term sea is associated to Yam as the Hebrew, and then this term red is associated to Suf. Okay, so I'm going to look at this word first, right? So Suf, and we see the Red Sea, this term Red Sea, all over in Scripture, right? I mean, we see how often it comes up here. It's all over the place. This term means, it says it means red here, but it also means flags or weeds. And that's the first thing it says. Reed, rush, water plant, okay? Rushes, sea of rushes, Okay, so this should be the Reed Sea. Okay, see? Oh, okay. Suf, probably of Egyptian origin, a reed, especially the papyrus. Okay, so this whole statement leads you to this is probably this Reed Sea, or what's considered the Red Sea, is probably the Nile. Rushes in Nile Exodus. That's interesting. The Nile Exodus, but we're gonna get there. So anyway, reeds, rushes. Okay. I was surprised that I hadn't, ever heard of anything about this. And then you see how often, it's coming up. All through the book of the Exodus. Anyway, so this is important because we're told that, the actual water that was divided was the Red Sea water. But by definition, it looks like the water that was divided was the Nile River water. So the reason that that's important, family, because if the Most High parted the Nile River for his people, that alone is going to change their path. The path that the Israelites took to get to the land of Canaan, also known as the land of Lebanon. Okay? So there's your motive as to, why this would be changed. Okay? But anyway, I'm just showing. And this is also interesting down here. They're saying it could be the Red Sea, or the arms of the Red Sea, or the Gulf of Suez, a sea from Straits to Gulf of Aqaba. So even if you're going by some of these, again, this is they're saying that this is a general term. That's also interesting because we're just talking about Suf. Now let's take a look at Yam. Okay, so the Red Sea. So we looked at this term red, which really should mean, or it should read reed. That's how it should say or show. Okay, so sea. And I'm trying to go slow with this because it's where it led me was very jarring. Okay, so I'm just trying to go slow with this. But this term Yam, all right, it just means sea. It could mean the Mediterranean, or the Red Sea, or the Dead Sea, or the Sea of Galilee, or he just says a general, or it could be the mighty river Nile, the mighty river Nile, the sea, the Great Basin, and they're not really sure, apparently. They just stuck this H, so it could be just a body of water. But it's just interesting to me. I wasn't aware that all these terms that are being used for river, mostly, or certain rivers, especially when you're talking about boundaries, right? A lot of times these rivers are boundaries for a specific territory for a specific people, and the terms that they're trying to translate, they're telling us are general terms. So how did they come to know that this term in certain areas meant the Mediterranean as opposed to the Red Sea, as opposed to the river or the Nile? So again, it was just more cause for alarm for me to really look into these things. Okay, so Yam, from an unused root meaning. Okay, so they're not sure what the root meaning is. To roar, a sea. Okay, so this Yam represents a strong body of water, as as breaking and noisy surf. Okay, so the water's, and it's a strong body of water we see because it's there's turbulence. The Mediterranean Sea, sometimes a large river. I don't know. I'm just at a loss even doing this video. Even still, this is still. I've been looking into this pretty diligently for the last couple weeks now. I just can't believe some of the things that I've come across like this. So anyway, let's continue. So something else that I ended up coming across statements like this where it says, this is Exodus 14. I crossed out the red that's the subtopic, but we can't trust that at this point. So it says, now Yah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Yasharel, that they turn and camp before Pi Ha-Hirath, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon. You shall camp before it by the sea. So when it says this, what sea are they talking about? Okay, because they're associating it to the Red Sea, right? The Red Sea crossing. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Yasharel, they are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in. So I thought that this was an interesting statement too. Okay, so the revisionist video, he brought this up too, and I was like, this is an interesting statement. How are they closed in by the wilderness? And by the way, I'll get into these questions, but I'm just bringing up things that stuck out to me that was like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. Okay. And so this tactic worked. Okay. It worked for basically the Most High told his people whatever direction they were taking to turn around and camp before a certain place, a certain location, which I'm not sure because I don't know where Pi Ha-Hirath is, and I don't know where Migdol is. Okay. And I don't know where Baal Zephon is. So I know some of these places where like they tell you they are, but it doesn't add up. Okay, so this is Exodus 10. Okay, and I was looking at the locust situation. Okay, so if we look at, I'll just start in verse 12. It says, then Yah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand over the land of Mitzrayim for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Mitzrayim and eat every herb of the land, all that the hail has left. So Moshe stretched out his rod over the land of Mitzrayim, and Yah brought an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts, and the locusts went up over all the land of Mitzrayim. Okay, so all the land, right? And rested on all the territory of Mitzrayim. Okay, so I'm going to drop down to 16 here. Okay, so the locusts were eating up all the produce of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. Verse 16, then Pharaoh called for Moshe and Aaron in haste and said, I have sinned against Yah, your Elohim, and against you. Now therefore, please forgive my sin only this once, and entreat Yah, your Elohim, that he may take away from me this death only. So he went out from Pharaoh and entreated Yah, and Yah turned a very strong west wind, which took the locusts away and blew them into the Red Sea. Okay, so this is really interesting here. So it makes the wind direction, I guess, makes sense. He brought an east wind for the locusts, assuming we can trust that. And then he brought an opposing wind. But it says here that he blew them into the Red Sea. So I wanted to show, like we know the Hebrews were in Goshen. And let's take a look at where some of these locations are. Okay, so here is Goshen. All right, And it looks like Pharaoh was probably maybe in this city where it says Tanis, or so this city maybe, Ramses, one of those, okay? And you can see that, the area that they're in, right? So they're in this land of Goshen, and all these cities are, right along the Nile River, which makes sense, right? So he's saying that an east wind, okay, according to what the scripture says, so a wind coming from this direction and blowing west, okay, came and brought the locusts. Then he brought a west wind to take the locusts away. So if everyone is by, all the cities are on the Nile, how would anyone even know that the locusts got blown into the Red Sea? I hope that made sense. So, this is where everybody's living. So let's say, okay, let's just go with the Hebrews. Okay, so if let's say they're right here in, in this area. How did the locusts get blown into the Red Sea? The Red Sea doesn't start till down here. So my point in saying this is, we looked at that term red, which really means reed sea, right? So if we read it as they got blown into the Nile River, that makes way more sense. That's how everybody knew, because that's where everybody is, right? And everybody can see, the locusts got blown into the river. It just doesn't make any sense. Nobody would know if they got blown into the Red Sea, for one. And two, that would have to be, and I'm not saying that the Most High couldn't do it, but this would be an exceptional wind to blow them all the way into the Red Sea, where nobody could see that he sent them. I just thought that was an interesting point also. Here, if you guys see this the map here where it shows Mount Sinai is here. When I was in Christianity, they were telling us that Mount Sinai was in the Sinai Peninsula, okay? And then eventually it changed. It was like, oh, you know what? We found out that it's actually over here. But I recently found out watching the revisionist.org. I didn't catch this until he mentioned it, but Mount Sinai is said in scripture that they went to Mount Sinai after leaving Egypt. After they left Mitzrayim, they eventually got to Mount Sinai. So it just seems to me that they figured out, oh snap, where we think Mount Sinai is it was still part of Egypt, which would conflict with Moshe's recording of it. So then it was like, oh, it's actually over here, and he must have parted the Red Sea. So anyway, all that to say that it's just interesting. They're guessing, okay? And which also makes sense of why so many people have issues with the Exodus, and also this, this has been said for a long time that there simply isn't a lot of archaeological evidence for this. And maybe that's why, because we're looking in the wrong places. Okay, so this is Exodus chapter 19. Okay, so it says, in the 3rd month, after the children of Yasharel had gone out of the land of Mitzrayim. Okay, so they've been out the land for a while. They've been traveling for 3 months now. Right? After the 3rd month, after the children of Yasharel had gone out of the land of Mitzrayim. On that same day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Okay, so it took them 3 months after they left Mitzrayim, and they finally came to the wilderness of Sinai. Right? For they had departed from Rephidim, had come to the wilderness of Sinai, and camped in the wilderness. So Yasharel camped there before the mountain. Okay, so if we go back to the, let's see, where was the map? Okay, so again, here's the land of Goshen, all right, where it was, it was like the best land of Mitzrayim. They're telling us that, they went through the Sinai Peninsula and then into Mount Sinai, which is supposed to be somewhere over here. And that took 3 months. So it took them 3 months to get from here to, the southern portion of the Sinai Peninsula. It just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, something else that the revisionist YouTube channel had brought up was also really important. So this is portions of the Red Sea, okay, around the Sinai Peninsula. And we see here's a Great Lake, but it doesn't appear that there's much water in here. So what were they drinking through these 3 months? This is a saltwater body. The Red Sea is a saltwater body. Okay. So anyway, all that to say that, again, it would make way more sense if they were traveling along the Nile River all that time. Because we do have, it's noted in scripture where the people complained because they were thirsty. And that was when they were, in wilderness situations, right? Which means they must have departed from their water source. So we know, wherever the Mount Sinai is, it probably is a ways away from the Nile. Okay, so this is Genesis 15, and I just wanted to go back and take a look at the actual land that the Most High was going to give to Abraham. I'm just going to start in verse 18. Okay, this is Genesis 15. He goes through the 400-year prophecy, and then verse 18 he says, on the same day Yah made a covenant with Avram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Mitzrayim to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Okay, so he's giving us boundaries, right? Land boundaries from this river, the Nile, right, to the great river, the river Euphrates, wherever this river is. Okay, so I'm gonna bring up another map so that we can at least see where the Nile is and where we're told the river Euphrates is, because in verse 19 he tells us exactly who's in this area. Okay, so this represents the boundaries according to what we just read in Genesis 15, assuming that this is the Euphrates. So if these are the boundaries, so first of all, it's telling you in scripture, right, that this portion of Africa is supposed to be part of the Holy Land. So we know for sure that some of Africa is the Holy Land. Okay? And I mean, at one point, all this was considered, Northeast Africa. But I'm talking about people today, with the Suez Canal. This is definitely Africa, right? If we go back and look at Genesis 15, okay? So these peoples, from the Kenites all the way to the Jebusites, all these different peoples, all right? Which one of them, which one of those peoples dwelt in this area? because he didn't mention the Egyptians. Okay, the Egyptians are right there on the Nile, but that means that there's people in these other areas. So all those peoples that were mentioned are supposed to have lived throughout this entire region, because he didn't mention like the Midianites, right, which are supposed to be right here according to where they tell us, or Edomites, or the Edomites always lived close to the Israelites. Then there's like Moab and Ammon. Oh, I think some of those were mentioned. The Amorites, okay, obviously the Canaanites, since Canaan, that territory was known as Canaan because the Canaanites had taken it, okay, and they shouldn't have been there at all. That was actually the land of Lebanon before Canaan and his descendants began to set up shop there. So we'll get into that too, but it's just interesting. This isn't a very large amount of peoples. This is a small list considering the land that allegedly they were on. And so all this comes down to, where is Canaan? Because if you find Canaan, you find the Holy Land. And I'm not talking about Canaan's actual territory, because he has a territory that he was supposed to be in, but we're talking about the land that he just went ahead and took for himself, even though it did not fall to his lot. And that may be a lot, depending on your knowledge regarding the Book of Jubilees. But basically, I brought this up in the comic Hebrew series, okay, in the second part of Noah, where the sons of Noah had cast lots for the territories of earth. Okay, so Shem got the first lot, and he got a territory of the earth, it basically amounted to Middle Earth. Okay, Ham got the second portion, which was in the south. And then Japheth got the last portion, which was in the north. Okay? So that's also really important for a few different reasons, and we'll get into that coming up in later videos.